At this time, we'll call to order the Muskegon County Board of Commissioners Community Development Strategic Planning Committee with the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Foster,
Here.
Commissioner Hovey Wright,
Here.
Chairman Hughes,
Here.
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Excuse.
Hughes. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
And we have a quorum. Next up is the approval of minutes for January 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved by Commissioner Foster, supported by Commissioner Wilkins. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor use vote of saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And that motion passes. Next up is public comment on an agenda item. Is there anyone in the public that would like to have a comment on an agenda item? Seeing no one stepping forward, we'll move forward to the presentation on Nugent Sand property.
Thank you, Commissioner Loring. I'm sorry, Commissioner Nash.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm pleased to be here today, Commissioners, to give you an update on the Nugent Sand property. And Caitlin Hegedus is here today with me from the CVB, and she's also works with the parks. And we also have Mr. Charette and Mr. Hall as owners representatives here for the Nugent Sand property. And we'd just like to give you a quick update on the presentation that we conducted the other night in Norton Shores. It was a public information session. We had a packed house there at the Norton Shores Library. There were about 100 people there. The social media chatter has all been very positive about it, as were the comments at the presentation itself. We collected all of the comments and archived them. You have a copy of the comments in front of you, and we will be accepting comments until March 3rd. And actually, I think March 3rd is the day comments close. Is that correct, Caitlin?
Mm-hmm.
That's the public hearing. So we will be able to collect comments that day too. And the grant application itself is due April 1st. Some of the topics that were discussed at the public information session by the community residents that were gathered there were the trails within the facility, provided it is acquired by the county, the potential for camping, fishing, archery and limited bow hunting, parking and access, and then the impact on the neighbors. There was a brief discussion too about the potential for environmental issues there, but they have, the owners currently have a action document that was produced after the property had ceased operations. So it's a clean site as far as we know now. The grant will require a phase 1 environmental to begin with. So that will also be conducted in upcoming months. And there's a lot of other additional work that would be needed to be completed before we submit the grant application on April 1st. So the appraisals are underway, and they are also needed for the grant application. The environmental report, which I mentioned earlier, it's not really, a report is needed for the application, but the phase 1 does not have to be submitted at the same time or at the due date of the application, which is April 1st. So we don't have to have the phase 1 completed by then, although it appears we may be able to get that done by the grant deadline. So the timeline for upcoming actions is March 3rd. We have the Ways and Means Committee meeting. So at that time, we'll seek approval from the board to apply for the grant. We'll hold a public hearing on the grant application, collect any comments to be included in the grant application during that public hearing. And then we will ask for a resolution for the grant application signed by the county clerk, and that's a requirement for the grant application. We have to have that resolution to submit along with the
From
the
us?
grant from the county board. Yes. And then it will be kind of a waiting period. We'll know more about the grant and potential acceptance of the grant in September, October. The final decision by the DNR is in December, typically. So during that time, we will be discussing a potential activation plan if the grant is accepted by the DNR and we're able to move forward with the process of acquiring the land and making the purchase of the land. We will have 90 days to open the facility once the sale is complete and the grant is, if the grant pays for that sale. We also will be talking about a citizens advisory group. That was brought up by the residents at the meeting in Norton Shores, and there was quite a bit of interest in that. So we'd like to get that conversation going, within the next few months to begin to line up the folks that would be part of that citizens advisory group. And we'd like to have that comprised with a good percentage of local residents in the area, because the property does it's abutted by a couple of smaller neighborhoods in the, I'm going to forget the name, Winnetasca and Idlewild and Seminole Street. Yes. Those kind of abut the property. So we'd like to make sure that we have community residents involved in that citizens advisory committee. We'd also like folks that are, involved in environmental groups, wildlife type groups, sporting groups that would potentially use the facility. Again, the facility, you have a map in front of you, and this map just kind of outlines a couple of the ideas that we had for the property if it were to be acquired by the county. There are 2 large lakes there that we would hope would remain quiet lakes. So people would be able to canoe, kayak, and potentially stand-up paddleboard on the lakes. There could be shore fishing or kayak fishing in the lakes potentially. And then another thing that really wasn't delved into very deeply at the meeting the other day is that we would like to make sure the property has certain areas that are accessible to folks with disabilities or handicapped individuals, so disabled individuals, I'm sorry. So we'd like to have some viewing areas there and other methods for people in chairs, for instance, to be able to get around the property and to be able to enjoy the outdoors with their families and friends. At this time, that's about all I have to report now. Again, we're going to be working diligently on the grant application itself, and I should say Caitlin will be doing the bulk of that work on the application, but we'll all be helping her, and we have others that will be helping with that application. So at this time, I could take any questions that you may have.
Yes.
If I may introduce also April Schultz, who is from the Land Conservancy West Michigan. Title is Land Protection Director.
Oh,
And we also have in the audience John Schultz. He's been through this with Ottawa Sands project, and he was the one that led that project. So he's helping us through this process as well. So obviously he already introduced Denny and Larry if they want to speak. It'd be up to you, Mr. Chair.
What?
I have a question.
Go right ahead, Commissioner
Just
Scully.
curious, Bob. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, I think this is a great plan, but why did they stop mining that? Because this area where it says potentially a campground, if there ever is one, that all could have been mined, couldn't it?
I really can't comment on that. I know that they've, Kenny, please. Could you step up to the mic and state your name, please?
I'm Denny
You're on
Charette.
television. Oh my gosh, well, it adds what, 60 pounds? 20 years.
Just your name and
Oh, I'm sorry, Denny Charette from Charette Group and Larry Hall from our company. We've been involved in these types of things before, and what you want to do is what most quarries do, aggregate quarries, limestone quarries, and in this case, sand, is you create a developable parcel. And in order, if you're going to create lakes, you got to leave enough room to have lots, and that was behind the obvious thinking in the design of that. So,
Okay.
but we ceased operation. Bob Shannonette is a partner of mine in a number of things, and I have a file since 2005 getting us to this place. So I have some, I have some history if y'all have any questions. So.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Hughes.
First of all, I'd like to say the meeting that we had at Norton Shores Library was an overflow crowd, and it was very well received. So one of the residents asked to see a show of hands of people that supported it, and it was full of hands. So
Right.
it was a very good crowd. And I'd just like to say, I've been involved in conservation all my life and worked on a lot of different conservation projects. And I don't think I've ever seen one that has restored a piece of property that was as basically damaged because of the sand mining into. I've never seen one that was restored better than this. It's absolutely beautiful. You would never know that those were not inland lakes that God put here. I mean, it's absolutely a beautiful piece of property. They maintained the trees, the water lines, the levels of the lake. I mean, they just did an absolutely wonderful job. I just can't say enough about that.
Anyone else?
Marcia?
Yeah, I'm glad that that you're here from the Ottawa Sands project, because I've been hearing for a while about how great that project is and how well it's received and popular, and we could have the same thing here in Muskegon County. It's very exciting.
Commissioner Larry.
Yes, so this is probably a question for Bob. I've got several concerns with this. So the public meeting we had,
Mhm.
most of the residents were not just the residents here, but the people that I chatted with there. Almost all of them were either from Norton Shores or the city of Muskegon. This will impact the budget for the entire county, not just Norton Shores. And if I was going to get a park in my backyard and have others pay for it, I'd be all in too. But you're asking the residents of all of the outlying areas to pay for this. There was multiple discussions. If I was going to have a park in my backyard that somebody else was going to pay for, I wouldn't want a campground there. I'd want it to be my own little private sanctuary. And the public comments I got, I actually found that offensive, because my residents from Ravenna are not going to drive there for a day park just to spend the day. If they go there, they're going to want to camp there.
From Ravenna?
From Ravenna. If they're going to come into town to spend an entire day, they're going to want to be able to come there and camp. And there are other townships that were not represented there. Sullivan, Fruit. I didn't speak to anybody from the outlying area that night, and there's none on the list from the outlying district. There were people from Ottawa County there last night putting their 2 cents in that suggests that we need to have a millage in Muskegon County to support this park. My residents don't want a parks millage. And so the second point of this is, if we'd have had this public meeting at one of our current parks that are not being maintained, the obvious question would be,
I take exception to that.
I would hope so. Have you been to Patterson Park?
I've been to Patterson
Okay,
Park,
there's
yes.
broken windows in Patterson Park that coons can climb into the bathrooms through. The playground equipment, before you play on it, you better have a tetanus shot, because it's covered in rust and falling apart. You can't go more than 5 miles an hour down the road because the gates don't even work. The potholes are so big you could tear a wheel off your car. So I hope you take exception to that, because the outlying areas are not being serviced by our Parks Department. You've got broken windows. I can see the jagged glass with a board that doesn't even cover the hole in the restrooms out there.
Commissioners, can we stick to the Nugent Sand?
Yeah, so that's my point. If you can't maintain the current structure, how are you going to maintain this? That's going to fall on the burden of the taxpayer, all of the county, not just the residents of Norton Shores and Muskegon Heights.
The reason that the event was held in Norton Shores was because the entire property is within the city of Norton Shores. It was a first meeting. It was a public information session. There was information had been put out for several weeks beforehand that was all over Facebook. It was in newspapers. It was everywhere. So, you know, anyone could have come to that meeting. People from outside our county too.
They did, and I
They
did
did.
too. And I'm coming here to represent the constituents in my area that are going to help pay for this. And if this
What-
goes forward, I'm just
Yeah.
so there were multiple comments of people in the audience and on this sheet. They don't want a campground. Well, if this was in my backyard, I would want to keep it somewhat close to my little community, particularly if others are going to pay for it. So if you do go forward with this, and let's talk about the revenue that the campground would provide. That would provide some maintenance for this.
Mhm.
You have talked in previous meetings about the value of campgrounds to the county's budget with what tourists would bring into these campgrounds. And you're suggesting that the people from up in North Muskegon will spend tax dollars in the city if they're camping here. This is a lot closer
Mhm.
to the city, and these people might actually go into town and spend some of these dollars in town.
There's camping at Hoffmaster too, and some of our other county parks.
Correct.
Up north.
Right. So my suggestion is
Mhm.
we need to make this more accessible to the residents of the entire county, and camping is one way to do that.
It is.
Secondly, this is going to take this piece of property, if it's potentially developed, this comment came up last night, that the revenue from the surrounding homes, their values will go up. Their values don't go up until they sell those homes. That could be 20 to 30 years from now. Those prices are capped. Their values don't go up until they sell them or die, and they change hands. So that's going to cap it for 20 years. If this is developed into a real estate development, those prices would be immediately impacted to the budget, where those houses that would go in there would currently would be on the tax rolls for their value at the sale.
So you're
So-
saying it should become a residential area?
I am suggesting that the county is strapped for resources, and we are potentially robbing the county of these resources by turning it into a park. I'm not against, I like parks myself. I'm not opposed to parks, and if it goes that direction, so be it. I will probably go to that park myself. My suggestion is that our resources are strapped at the county level. We struggle with our budget, and this is going to take revenue out of our county budget.
Our parks are enterprise funds, and they go to support the parks. The parks that make the money for the county are the parks that are open to the public and that have charges. There is Pioneer Park, Minor Park, and Twin Lake County Park are the parks that charge people to get in. There's camping at two of those parks. There's also camping at Blue Lake County Park, but there's no charge to enter that park. We take the funds that are generated from those parks and put them back into the parks.
Okay, so how are you going to charge for this if there's no camping?
We have not gotten there yet.
Let's just stick to this is a presentation. This is not a hearing, and we have a lot of stages to go through. So these
Right.
conversations can be had, especially coming up in the future. There will be more hearings. There will be more times for public to come in, and we just need to make sure that people are there and people are able to make those.
Right.
But today we're
We
just
can
doing a
move them wherever
presentation.
you'd like.
We just
Commissioners.
want to do a
We can have one
presentation,
in
and we want to
first
make
quarter.
sure that everybody's got information, and that's pretty much what we want to do. All right.
Mhm.
Would you have another comment?
If I may, Commissioner, I appreciate your passion on this. We've done a great deal of quantitative analysis on this. And Nugent Sand was at our company's urging that they consider
Mm-hmm.
this contribution. You were there the other night and heard that background. Quantitatively, I understand on capping of assessed values. Our judgment, based on a multiplicity of similar comparables, is that there'll be $50, $100 million of new improvements put in this area with what I believe to be the best land remaining on Lake Michigan. That the contribution margin right now to the city of Norton Shores is de minimis. I can't speculate on camping or non-camping. I can tell you, I believe we will see regional people are going to come here to be there. A good friend of mine developed a property up in Bay Harbor. You couldn't develop Bay Harbor. David Johnson is a friend of mine, and if you've been up there, it's an entire game changer. So I would be willing to debate, not now, the quantitative part of this. I don't think you're factoring whether they'll come from Ravenna or not. They will come from Chicago, and they'll stay in a hotel here, and they'll go to dinner out here. And so we're agnostic, other than our hearts would like to see this in the community. We're agnostic as to liquefying the asset as to who ends up with it. But this is, in my view, as I said the other night, a multi-centennial opportunity for this county. And there's so many hurdles that we have to go through that I believe, and I will also mention I had breakfast with Bob this morning, and he and I, depending upon the terms and conditions, Nugent Sand will make a significant contribution toward this. No one else is going to do that for you. And everyone has to have a little bit of skin into a game. And if you break down what this land cost, the 75% of the money is coming from the state, for goodness sake. So when you break down the contribution margin from Muskegon County without Nugent Sand on a per front foot basis on the lakes and on Lake Michigan on a per acre basis, it's I just don't think there's anything ever. And a good friend of mine is who John and April worked with, Galen Biker at Ottawa Sands. I know that property very well, and I was involved in that a little bit. So I think that I understand that, but I think the economic impact has been perhaps understated. I appreciate the concern, but I think it'll be a remarkably positive impact on the county. And so when Ottawa makes one job, there are 20 new jobs. This will have a concentric effect in the area, and there's demonstrated model after model about that. Where at me, if someone's going to give me 75% to buy it, I don't need a whole lot of that. But we're happy to share with you our view on that if you'd like to at some other time. I just would respectfully disagree with some of those assessments on cost.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I have one more question for him.
Yes.
So that quantifiable information you can present to the board or to myself?
No, what I said was we have done some theoretical quantitative analysis on what we think has happened, what will happen. It's the board's responsibility. We're real estate developers, but we're doing this in a role of a real estate brokerage house. It's you don't want mine; you want your own. And because I'm saying what our opinion is based on the experiences we've had in similar situations when we built significant projects, and not something like this. The profound effect it has uplifting values as well as creating new tax base.
So Bay Harbor, you mentioned that earlier. Bay Harbor, is that a park or is that a golf course?
No, there's no. There's a golf course up there. There's a retail area up there, and then there are $10 zillion per homes up there. I was saying that I looked at that and that was a joint venture between David and Consumers Power, as I recall. And so that project was a for-profit project, but the impact it had in the area was profound. If we put 400 houses, as you suggested, you might prefer, on this property, the impact on tax revenue will be significant. I don't know what the county's share of that would be, but my suspicion is that when set against the opportunity to create an amenity that I believe will create significant additional revenue for the county and jobs, I don't think there's anything comparable that you can compare it to.
So I would just suggest that you don't take me wrong. I do appreciate Nugent Sand and their generosity in offering this. I don't want to sound like I'm negative towards you or them.
Understood.
I just want this board and the county to be looking out for all of the residents, not just the few in Norton Shores and Muskegon that will be in their backyard.
I think that's a fair comment, and we've heard it. And in no way do we, Nugent or our group, take this anyway, but as a respectful discussion. But I would respectfully disagree with your assumed outcome on economics.
Thank you,
All
Danny.
right,
You
let's-
know, we'll have a work session on this, as we get farther down the road and have a little bit more to report. This is awful early in the stages, and we haven't even voted to move forward yet. So we'll, so much more information will become available after we have applied for the grant. So we'll,
And for the sake of time, we want to
Yeah.
move forward. We have
Yes, we've
2
gotta-
other
yeah.
meetings and we have another works meeting. So, is there anything else?
thank you,
No.
Bob.
That's it for
Okay.
me. Thank you.
All right. So we'll move on to old business. Any old business come before this committee? Any
I have.
commissioners comment?
Are we ever going to get to tour the bathroom at Pioneer Park?
Yes, we're working on that schedule for you.
We thought maybe where the snow was plowed, that wasn't plowed, it would be.
Wait for the snow.
That isn't over. We need to look at it. That's all.
Right.
Okay.
Good
We'll have
point.
a date scheduled.
Any new business? Any new business come before this committee? Public comment? Anyone in the public like to have a comment? Final board comments? Accept the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Support.
We are adjourned.